Nyní prosím paní Heike Rüttgers, aby se ujala slova.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here today with you and to present to you what I would call a special window within the activity of the European Investment Bank. Just to give you as well a very broad introduction into what EIB is and what EIB does. Now, the EIB was founded with all the other EU institutions by the Treaty of Rome in 1958 and is the European Union's long-term lending institution. Its shareholders are nowadays the 27 EU member states, so the Czech Republic is also one of the shareholders, and their finance ministers are sitting on the board of governors of the EIB. To give you an order of magnitude of the bank's lending volume, in 2010, the EIB provided a total of 72 billion for 460 projects around the world, including roughly 1 billion for the African, Caribbean and Pacific region. That is the region I will explain a little bit further what we are doing there, and South Africa. Broadly, you can say that roughly 10 to 15% of the bank's lending volume annually are actually going to partner countries of the EU, with the oldest lending mandate being the African, Caribbean and Pacific regions. Other regions are pre-accession countries who have applied for the EU membership. Also neighborhood countries in the Mediterranean as well as the eastern part, and then also a small mandate for Asia and Latin America and South Africa as being a specific mandate. And the bank also maintains a AAA rating. Now, what are we doing under the ACP partnership, the EU ACP partnership, which is a partnership of the European Union with the African, Caribbean and Pacific regions, and which are currently handled and operated under what we call the Cotonou Agreement, which was agreed for the period 2000 to 2020, and under which the European Commission provides grant funds for development aid, whereas EIB is the lending arm of the European development policy. What we are seeking is basically, in terms of development objective, we seek to foster economic growth through poverty reduction and also trying to achieve and contribute to the Millennium Development Goals. How do we do that under this Cotonou Agreement? We are mainly looking for private sector development, and that may be through foreign direct investment, that may be also through local private sector, which we try to promote and develop, also through the promotion of the local financial sector, which is very important when it comes to SMEs, and also promoting investments of commercially viable public entities. Now, the means are actually the projects we are supporting, so we have a project approach, contrary to a program approach by the European Commission. We support projects that are financially, economically, and socially and environmentally sustainable through a wide range of financial instruments, and I will give you more details later on. What is our major constraint is that with the Cotonou Agreement, there was for the first time introduced compared to previous financial protocols where we were given budgetary funds which were on lend. That was the establishment of the investment facility, the ACP investment facility, which is a sustainable revolving fund, so which has to maintain its value in terms of the capital contributions by the EU member states in real terms to become on the long term as a sustainable instrument. And obviously, we have to mitigate the risk of our member states as they are guaranteeing also a small portion of activity under the bank's own resources. So again, to give you the broad picture of European development aid, which is managed for the ACP countries under the European Development Fund. There is the portion for the European Commission, which is only grants for national and regional indicative programs, as well as regional programs. For the EIB, that means actually that we have 3 windows we operate with. There is, first of all, the bank's own resources, so which we borrow on the capital markets, which benefit there from a partial guarantee from the EU member states. For a total of 2 billion to cover the period of between 2008 and 2013. We also have then, on the other hand, the investment facility, and that is the instrument I want to present a little bit more in detail to you, which then can actually, as a risk-bearing instrument, financed out of budgetary funds under the EDF, can offer a broad range of instruments, loans, equity, guarantees, and which is structured as a revolving fund, and which was established since 2003, and which has a total capital endowment provided by the EU member states of 3.1 billion for the ACPs, and then you have some other overseas territories which are also operated under that mandate for roughly 50 million euro. So this is, if you want to, the capital endowment of the investment facility. Just to explain to you how we actually decide whether we use the investment facility or the bank's own resources. The underlying principle is that both envelopes complement each other. Roughly, we do finance our private sector investments under the IF, as this instrument is meant to be able to offer risk-bearing instruments and to support a higher risk, which you normally have in private sector operations. Whereas the EIB own resources have to be secured to a higher extent, and this is mainly used for public sector investments towards public infrastructure. So this money would be lent on to sovereign or sub-sovereign borrowers. We do have also some private sector projects covered under that envelope, but then they have to provide a first-class guarantee. Overall, I would say, well, roughly 2/3 of our portfolio, if you take the 2 resources together, have been going to private sector projects since 2003. Now, in a nutshell, to give you also an order of magnitude of our activity in the ACP regions, I have put here on this slide the figures since 2008. You will see that we had a serious increase in lending in 2009 and 10. That was basically on a voluntary basis, a front-loading exercise to reply to the financial crisis. So we came up with figures up to 1 billion and only covering sub-Saharan Africa, Caribbean and Pacific again. The forecast now for the total amount signed in 2011 as to date is that we think we will end up with a total of roughly 730 million euro for about 26 projects. You can say that in the last 3 or 4 years, we had 25 to 30 projects per year we were financing in that part of the world. On top of that, we, as this is managed under a specific mandate, there would add up three projects in South Africa for a total of 165 million. Now, under the investment facility, as this being the revolving fund I want to present in more detail to you, the revolving fund is meant to be sustainable in real terms, so the capital invested by the EU member states has to, over the period until 2020, be maintained in real terms. But can offer a large spectrum of risk-bearing financial instruments, going from direct loans, normal classical senior debt, over to subordinated debt, intermediate loans, so loans going to financial intermediaries in the partner countries, quasi-equity operations, equity directly, in venture capital funds, guarantees, as well as local currency funding, which is often necessary for local investors. The envelope, well, I forgot to say, if we go back to the slide here, that we have an envelope actually also under the EDF for interest rate subsidies, and that was for the period 2008-2013, a total of 400 million euro. So this is grant money provided by the EU member states, which is meant to be used for interest rate subsidies in certain specific, under certain specific conditions, as well as to a certain share of it technical assistance for project-related technical assistance, so either for project preparation or project implementation. And this amount is up to 40 million, but we are currently in the process, having almost used this envelope, to increase this envelope for technical assistance. So we can also offer interest rate subsidies as well as project-related technical assistance, and these two instruments are then on a grant basis. Now, what are the specific provisions for the management of this investment facility for the EIB? It was concluded that the member states' contribution, so the total capital endowment of 3.1 billion, would not be mobilized as of the first day. So it's not like a trust fund where everybody puts the money on the table as of day one, but to only match actually any capital gaps which cannot be covered by the reflows which the fund receives out of the repayments of previous operations. Obviously, as you can imagine, we had a first period until broadly 2007, where the bank was mainly running out of capital contributions by the EU member states. And it was as of that year that we actually could start also financing part of our activity out of the reflows, repayments of loans we had provided earlier, and that we can also cover the costs incurred by the EIB for managing this facility. They are also paid from revenues out of the EIF since July 2008. So currently we are using mainly and in the first place cash reflows to, for new commitments, and we do then project our resource requirements for capital contributions from the EU member states on an annual basis. To give you just, well, to visualize a little bit how that worked, we had a first endowment under what we call Cotonou 1, so under the first financial protocol for the whole Cotonou agreement, which covered the period 2000 to 2007. So we have been using actually these funds up to now, and we still continue actually to use these funds and to call upon these funds until 2013, as expected as of today. And we have been complementing this out of with reflows for our annual cash treasury needs in order to finance the actual disbursements under the investment facility. We expect to start calling upon the Cotonou II financial protocol, and that will then be interesting for the Czech Republic, because it's only then that the Czech Republic, as a contributor to this financial protocol, will be also asked to provide its share to it as of 2014. And we do currently expect that we might stop asking any capital calls from member states around 2017-2018. So then the fund can run only on reflows. Nevertheless, we needed the whole capital endowment of 3.1 billion. Why? Because obviously, as any financial institution, you have to match any commitment you make to any borrower with some capital. As the IF is not actually borrowing money on the capital markets, we needed an underlying capital to commit. And it's as of end of this year, early next year, that we will have actually committed the full initial capital endowment of the almost 3.2 billion, and that we will then start actually committing out of the reflows we will receive on previous commitments. That provides the fund with a certain leverage effect. So out of the 3.2 billion which had been subscribed initially, we have to date, we have only mobilized 1.2 billion, which we have actually asked to pay in from the EU member states. But we have already financed 3.2 billion, and we expect obviously a higher leverage effect in the coming years, until 2020 and beyond, as we continue to commit funds out of the reflows. This is just to give you a rough idea how such a revolving fund works. Now, what is our strategic focus on our operation in the ACP regions? It's mainly in, well, there are two focuses. The one is infrastructure, and there this would go to energy, water, transport, and telecommunication, and maybe to public and private sector, as well as, on the other hand, the promotion of the financial sector through the promotion of SMEs, but also microfinance. And that we do mainly through intermediation to local financial institutions. We have, under recently renewed external mandates, new high-level horizontal objectives which have been added for all the regions. As I mentioned, the private sector development is a priority overall. Also social and economic infrastructure, as well as recently climate change through mitigation and adaptation. Now, in the infrastructure, we consider that we can play a role in providing and developing basic infrastructure, essentially in ensuring economic growth and private sector development, because only when you have basic infrastructure services which work properly, you can also develop a private sector properly and create room for investment. Also through the efficient delivery of public sector services, we promote partnerships with private sector specialists, so through PPP arrangements, as well as regional integration, as this is also an objective for the EU in general. It is also an objective in our partner countries to unlock growth and generate new business opportunities in the partner countries we operate in. One instrument which had been founded and which is managed by the EIB, but which gives access to grant funding for infrastructure investment in Africa is the EU Africa Infrastructure Trust Fund, which can provide grant funding either for interest rate subsidies or for technical assistance or other what we call blending instruments to improve the preparation of regional projects in Africa. In the financial sector, we basically look for finance for growth through enabling creditworthy financial institutions to grow locally, to develop innovative financial instruments suited to local markets, as well as through support to microfinance. And that ultimately, by that we intend to provide support to the private sector, mainly through either long-term credit lines for on-lending to SMEs or through equity stakes in financial regional intermediaries, also through local currency products, as you can imagine for local SMEs or anyway for any investor in Africa who is not an export product, so is not any hard currency revenues. It's important to get local currency funding, and that on a long-term basis is often not available locally. In the microfinance, we cover also a broad range of initiatives. We have been diversifying recently. We are now trying a new regional dimension approach where we try to bring in new players in the market, as this has proven to be a very important tool for private sector development at a very small scale in Africa. Now, in energy and SMEs, what are we looking there for? For energy, it's mainly access to reliable, sustainable energy, which is key for economic growth. We provide long-term funding for new sustainable power generation and distribution projects. We are also looking at a lot of transmission of energy in order to connect regions and have a more efficient power supply for larger regions. There we foster actually the cooperation between regional power pools and interconnectors between African states, because that is what is often missing in these countries. With access to finance for SME, we try to accelerate growth and to reduce poverty, as this has been also proven to be the most efficient tool to foster growth in Africa. We do support entrepreneurship through local financial intermediaries, and we try to respond to the needs of local and also regional banks. Now I would like to present you a few examples of private sector projects we have been financing under the IF, just to give you some concrete examples. One small corporate loan we did, but which is still a foreign direct investment with Philips in Lesotho, is the Philips Lighting Mazero project. It was a loan of 5 million euro, and which also received an interest rate subsidy because of its environmental dimension. And the project is about a manufacturing plant to produce energy-saving bulbs for the Southern African market. So there is a serious environmental impact of it. The project includes also suitable recycling facilities which were put in place. It reduces carbon emissions, as you can imagine. It created local jobs. We brought a foreign direct investor into a sub-Saharan African country with Philips, and it was also a diversification of the economy away from wavering textile industry, which was the predominant industry in this country. The interest rate subsidy was used for social improvements, just to be very clear about it, the interest rate subsidies in private sector projects are not applied to increase a financial profit of the private investor, even if it would be a nice thing, but it has to have some strong environmental or social benefits which are created by that interest rate subsidy. In this case, it was for social improvements, for workers and families, as it is used to build on-site health clinic and infrastructure as well as schooling infrastructure. Another example is the Ohorogongo cement project in Namibia, which was co-financed with DEG, by the way. It's a project finance, a new, or in Namibia, even the first cement factory, which was then inaugurated in February 2011, with an annual production capacity of 700,000 tons to meet urgent infrastructure needs in the country. So it reduced dependence on imports, it boosted the economic growth by that, it uses best available technology, so there are 30% less electrical consumption than traditional cement plants, and it obviously creates local employment and transfer of expertise, as it is again a foreign direct investment project with a German partner. And there is also some social dimension to it, as there was a trust built to have created some activities and projects around social development. Another project, and again a project finance, was a 30 million euro loan under a project finance scheme with an interest rate subsidy, this time for the environmental dimension of the investment, for 4 onshore wind farms to increase access to electricity in Cape Verde and to reduce carbon emissions. It's one of the largest wind projects and first renewable energy PPP in sub-Saharan Africa, where we were very honored to be partner to that project. And it even received a Best Renewable Project in Africa prize at the Africa Energy Awards 2011 in Johannesburg. Another project, a PPP structure, is the Seychelles submarine cable. This was the investment for a fiber optic cable for telecommunication connecting the Seychelles to East Africa. Total investment of roughly $35 million US, co-financed with the African Development Bank. EIB provided an 8 million loan on its own resources, which was secured by a sovereign guarantee. But we also provided 4 million grant in order, from the EU Africa Infrastructure Trust Fund, in order to fill in an equity gap, because the local telecom operators were not able to mobilize enough funds for the equity stake of this PPP. And the dividend, which was imposed mandatory for this grant, because it was not the intention, again, that this grant should generate financial benefits to the promoters nor to the government. It is used to provide free internet access to schools and hospitals and the like. We have other cooperations with other institutions. It was already mentioned that we cooperate with the EDFIs, so the European Development Finance institutions, where we do have also a partnership where we do match financing from projects submitted by these partners. We are in the process of building up also a very close partnership with the African Development Fund and other 8 DFIs. For private sector investments in Africa, there is the ICCF, which was also mentioned earlier, for investing in climate-friendly private sector projects. And we also have a partnership for the financial sector in order to promote local financial sectors and regional financial integration in Africa. Other initiatives we use and we work with in the ACP regions. I mentioned the EU Africa Infrastructure Trust Fund, which is what we call a blending instrument, so which can provide grant money to make infrastructure projects with a regional dimension, make them bankable. There is also a risk capital facility which we manage for the European Commission, which is a special initiative to promote South African SMEs in South Africa. And there is also another fund which is called the Global Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Fund, which supports renewable energy and energy efficiency projects, project developers and SMEs It's a fund of funds, so where we try to mobilize private investments and to provide equity. And I thank you for your attention.